Hi, and welcome to our third episode of Talk of Purdue, where Jeff and I talk about the biggest news of the week. This week, thanks to Rupert Murdoch, I thought it'd be important to talk to our staff and make sure they weren't hacking the phones of President Cordova. They assured me that they weren't, but they all expressed interest in throwing custard pies at Jeff.
Rather than a pie, I got iced on Tuesday for my 23rd birthday. Welcome to Talk of Purdue. Today we're going to talk about Pell Grants, which find themselves on the chopping block as Congress debates the debt ceiling. Alicia has a story today about Pell Grants and what Purdue administrators are doing to combat that in Washington, D.C.
Well, surprisingly, Jeff, Purdue administrators aren't actually physically doing a whole lot. Their support's coming from Hovde Hall. In case you didn't know, Pell Grants are federally funded scholarships that are given to students to be used at for-profit universities, at state universities. They can really do whatever they want with it, especially because it does not have to be repaid to the government. It's not a loan. A huge number of Purdue students use Pell Grants. In this last year alone, it was almost 8,000, and that was almost $30 million. So, with the Republicans in Congress, as I like to call them, the evil empire, looking at Pell Grants for cuts, that can mean a significant number of Purdue students looking for less funding in this school year.
So what did you find out that the Purdue administrators are doing to try to help these students out who need it?
Well, I talked to the Vice President of Governmental Relations, Tim Sanders, and he was in D.C. a couple weeks ago and talked to a couple other universities and had Purdue kind of have its name on a letter of support against these cuts. So you have Vice President Sanders on that end. I talked to someone from financial aid, and they were saying that they're really going to be working with students for other options. Not really the best time for students, is it, this summer? You've got a tuition increase at the beginning of the summer. If you're here on campus, this heat's just awful. And now you have the federal government coming after your loans. I'm not really sure how we're all going to be standing in the next year.
What strikes me the most about the Pell Grant situation is that even at the highest level the federal government's willing to offer them, they cover a relatively small amount of students' tuition and fees. They used to cover up to 3/4 of tuition, but now on average they're down to 1/3 of all college costs. And at Purdue I calculated it to be about 25%. So even what Obama's pushing for is more than $5,000. That really doesn't go a long way for some of these students who really need this income.
Well, it's definitely not the end of this story. It's going to be something we'll be following as long as the debt ceiling talks are going on and also into the coming school year. Other big news coming out of D.C. this week comes from the Federal Elections Commission, which released its June numbers that show the campaign contributions for the presidential election in 2012. Now, I know it seems a bit early, but the numbers are pretty surprising, especially for our area, and Jeff did a story on it today. So Jeff, would you like to tell everyone who has raised the most money from the Purdue area so far?
Well, actually it's been Ron Paul. 2 Purdue members in ITAP donated combined more than $2,000 to outraise every other candidate, including President Obama. Now in 2008, President Obama raised way more money than any other candidate, and for a total of $75,000 that's right out of Purdue. That includes faculty, staff, researchers, and even some university administrators. Surprisingly, we saw former President Martin Jischke's name on a list of Obama donors, and he put forward more than $500. So I'm assuming that as this race goes on, Obama will pull away. I talked to some Purdue professors who said they just hadn't had a chance yet to donate their money, but I'm pretty surprised to see Ron Paul up there in the numbers. What about you?
Well, I'm curious about how former President Martin Jischke is an Obama supporter. How do you think President Cordova leans?
Well, I think one thing's for certain. President Cordova is probably not a Ron Paul supporter. But I'm not sure. What do you think? Do you think she's an Obama supporter? Well,
coincidentally, we also had a story about Cordova in today's paper, and we learned that she's a fan of rap music. President Obama is very vocal about the fact that he's a fan of Jay-Z. I don't know if the two of them would like to get together at a Jay-Z concert and talk politics, but I don't know, President Cordova is always full of surprises. One thing that we found especially surprising about these numbers is that it shows that Purdue professors really tend to lean more liberal when we've seen, especially in our coverage, that the most vocal students on campus are conservative.
That's right. Brett Holly, the current Purdue Student Government President, is a former member of Purdue Students for Daniels, and the current President Pro Temp of the Senate is a campaign intern for Richard Murdoch, the man running on kind of the Tea Party ticket for the Republican Senate seat against Richard Lugar. So, yeah, some of the most vocal people I've met seem to be Republicans, so I wonder if that ever sets up a clash in the classrooms. I have heard before from some people that happens.
Well, this topic is definitely not exhausted. We're going to be looking at it all fall semester and probably in upcoming talks with Purdue. The presidential election has a huge amount of news stories coming with it, so you can see those in the exponent as well. Other than those stories, we really didn't have too exciting of a week here in our newsroom, besides the fact that Jeff turned 23, which everyone had a lot of fun making fun of the new old man in the newsroom.
I'm not that old.
I can see your gray hairs from here.
It's probably the crappy fluorescent lighting in this room.
Well, thanks again for watching this week's Talk of Purdue.
Try to stay out of our police beat next week. We'll see you next Friday.